Okay. So in 1964, Mississippi, after the first mass meeting that summer, someone attempted to firebomb the church during the night. We found the remains of 2 ineffective Molotov cocktails. Fire had scorched the outer walls of the church, but the building was otherwise unharmed. That evening, Pap Hamer called Len and me into their small kitchen. Pap Hamer was a huge man, maybe 6'5" and perhaps 250. He was strong. After he and Mrs. Hamer were thrown off the plantation, the only kind of work he could get was called bull work. When a contractor needed someone who could handle really heavy material, Pap Hamer might get a job for a few days. Pap seemed to get a kick out of us being 2 idealistic white boys living next door. Pap called over to us and said, "Len and Joe, come on in here." He was holding a brown jug. He swung it up to his shoulder and took a swig. "Here, try this." Now, Len was 4 years older than me, but he was no big-time drinker in college. He took the first drink of this home brew, his face contorted, but only slightly. Now it's my turn. I nearly choked. Mr. Hamer laughed good-naturedly. "Okay. Here's what I want you boys to do. Take this shotgun and guard the church tonight." "Holy crap, Mr. Hamer. What are you talking about? You mean if somebody attacks the church or throws another firebomb, you want us to shoot them?" "No, boys, that would be crazy. Don't shoot at them. Just shoot up into the air, and they will wake the community up, and we'll come and put out the fire." So Len and I took the gun and settled under a small tree in the Hamer's backyard with a clear view of the church. Yes, we felt an ironic tension. We'd signed a commitment to nonviolence, and nonviolent resistance had shaped our training for a week. We were working for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And now, our first week in Mississippi, we're guarding the church with a shotgun. But that night, it wasn't the Klan or the local toughs or the White Citizens Council that attacked us. It was the mosquitoes. We'd moved in under a tree that sheltered a relentless and vicious horde of Mississippi mosquitoes. The church was safe. Nothing happened, except the mosquitoes feasted on Yankee blood. So, I believe in spiritual autobiography. I believe that it's this conjunction of stories. It's the Jesus story, including the Job story, and back into that, right? It's the Jesus story. It's my story. It's your story. And then it's their story. It's the story of other folk. In adult class, I got remembering the fact that my brother has had some emotional difficulties over the years, faced severe depression. And so now in his church, when the pastor has someone who's going through a severe depression, because the pastor knows my brother's story, the pastor says to the person, and this has just happened this past week, "Hey, you and Jeff need to talk. Jeff's been really through the valley of the shadow as well. You're going through it now. You need to talk to a friend who's walked that walk." So, and Mary and I have talked over the years about spiritual autobiography. A number of us got into reading Elaine Pagels, professor at Princeton, and, we kind of got into it because, she's this brilliant scholar and whatnot. And it's a little bit like this wonderful trick she has. It's like, you want to read about the Gnostic Gospels, Gospel of Thomas, you're interested? Great, come and read this book. And then you find the first 65 pages is the story of her dealing with her son's death and her husband's death, and with the church. And it's like, whoa, what a feast! How helpful this is to me, thinking about my death, the death of those I love, how the church responds to death, funerals, and whatnot. So somehow, in the church, we've a little bit gotten away, I think, from let's say, spiritual autobiography. The other one, great one from way back, is C.S. Lewis, A Grief Observed. Right after the war, C.S. Lewis goes around England and telling people, oh, yes, we've had a lot of suffering. It's sort of like God carving the sculpture. It's a little bit not quite platitudes, but we have to be careful there, right, Linda? Because it's like, on the one hand, sometimes those words are very comforting to people, but sometimes they're not. And so the story of A Grief Observed is of C.S. Lewis, this great luminary and who giving all these talks, providing explanations as to why horrible things happen. And then actually he wrote another book called Surprised by Joy. But, you know, the joke was that he met this divorced woman named Joy Davidman and marries her. And they said, yeah, he was surprised by joy, all right. And it's, you know, his wife. And then she dies tragically of cancer. And he writes this, which is very different in tone from his lectures, that it's all going to work out. So, at any rate, let me just speak briefly about you know, the book that I pulled together. Someone said, when did you start writing this? And I said, well, I guess the first kind of focused memory is back to 1980, because I have some visions in here that occurred while I was in the Guild for Spiritual Guidance. But I mean, I didn't write them up in this form. And some of the stories are from youth, from being a young person. When I was in 8th grade, I always hurried to the lunchroom, driven not by hunger, but by fear. I desperately needed to be at one of the first tables to be dismissed from lunch so I could get into the recreation room. Now, I was no fanatic about playing ping pong or shuffleboard. In fact, I didn't care what I played or did as long as I was in the recreation room, because we there were among the fortunate few. Most students went to the gym. And in the gym, the boys sat on benches against one wall and the girls against the other. The music of Bobby Darin and Elvis and Temptations would surround us, and then the dreaded moment. The really cool kids, the kids who were boyfriend and girlfriend, would start dancing. There were slow dances and jitterbugs in the stroll, and then the big new song came out and some were doing the hop. I moved to Arlington Heights 3 years before 8th grade, but I still felt like an outsider. With the onset of puberty, I'd become chubby. The changes in my body embarrassed me. I was both fascinated by and fearful of the girls with their beautiful, evolving bodies. I was very shy, so I read a lot. I would often walk a mile to the public library and then 2 miles home after school. I developed a love for basketball. But I was never invited to a boy-girl party, and at any rate would have been afraid to go. So when we 8th graders were confined to the gym for social dancing, I just hung out as far away from the music and the stage and the girls as I could get. My friend Kenny and I talked about our mutual joy in the book Kon-Tiki and the glory of Thor Heyerdahl's journey by raft across the Pacific. During those 30 minutes of agony, I often wished that I was on the Kon-Tiki, somewhere, anywhere but here. One day, this girl walked across the gym floor toward us. Then, terror of terrors, she asked me to dance. I, of course, said, no, I can't dance. I don't dance. She persisted, sure you can. Come on. Give it a try. It's a slow dance. No. I wanted to say to her, don't you understand that behind my no lurks my fear of my own changing body, of all you girls becoming women of sex, of growing up? Years later, I grieve for that boy who didn't have the simple courage to say yes to that kind and courageous girl. I thank her for reaching out her hand to me and asking me to dance. I apologize for my cowardly no. Maybe that moment roots my delight in the Leanne Rimes song with its lyrics that call out to us saying, if you have a chance to sit it out or dance, then dance. So the last chapter, the chapters are titled Growing Up. There were some obvious ones. Growing Up, Basketball, Mississippi, Justice Struggles, Love and Family, Pastor, some struggles joys and sorrows of being a pastor, dreams and visions, and death and dancing. And it was kind of fun that I could end it with an image of Gail and I dancing after my suffering cardiac arrest. So, I don't know if there's anything else really that, especially since the hour's late, we had a wonderful service. I don't know, questions? I think we're going to try to have a retreat on the theme of spiritual journaling. So again, you think of it in terms of, my story, your story, their story. So yes, we want to hear Frederick Buechner and Annie Lamott and Elaine Pagels, a great book by Kay Jamison. Some of us who were involved in the mental health first aid retreats a couple years ago heard this incredible woman talk about her own, she's a psychiatrist, talking about her own battle with mental illness, with severe mental illness. So again, it's somebody from the inside. It's not somebody, sort of lecturing from the outside about the struggles. The format that I came to that helped me a lot was I decided, instead of trying to write like a spiritual autobiography and connect everything, I would just write vignettes. I would just write little, one-pagers or two-pagers generally, and then not worry about connecting things. And so if you, in the book itself, if you read along, you think, well, you got called to seminary, but you don't say anything about being in seminary. Yeah. I just, none of those stories particularly came to me. Actually, some have in retrospect. I just didn't write them down or include them. So once I made that decision not to try to be like comprehensive or and also knit everything together, it's like, great. It's like building a quilt. I didn't feel like I had to sew it all together. I just, here's a piece of a quilt, here's a piece, here's a piece. I'm going to lump them into chapters and then sort of like, so be it, kind of thing. A couple strange things. One is writing a chapter on dreams and visions. So I thought to myself, okay, this is a little weird, talking about being in a sanctuary and having sort of a vision based upon a stained glass window in the back of the church of kind of the arms of Christ, the blood of Christ. I mean, it's moderately weird, You don't want to tell your friends you're doing that every day. They kind of might want to refer you. I guess I have to have confidence that the Bible says that the Holy Spirit will give us dreams and visions, and that every now and then a wisdom will break through that one has to process and decide, does this make sense or not? I don't know. But so I did that. Yes? No, go ahead. No, it's there. It's called Dostoevsky and Zmaya. Yeah, so that's kind of a longer, more sermonish kind of thing. It connects the themes of Dostoevsky, and I'm actually just finishing rereading Brothers Karamazov for the 20th time, and questions from my granddaughter. Yeah, Linda, did you?
So I was going to say, I think storytelling is the gift that we give to the community, right? That people can glean little, images of God or through people's stories. But we also learn about ourselves when we write them or when we tell them. So I'm wondering, what might you have learned about yourself in the writing of that book?
Well, one of the things that was striking, and again, I'm sort of repeating what I said in the earlier class, is that at the very end, I decided to include a story about me and my father when we took a long journey. We drove from here to Missouri, southwest Missouri, got in late. My father had been drinking. The family had gathered, but sort of like mid-afternoon to early evening cocktail hour kind of thing. And my father was very abusive to me for very little reason when we arrived. And I went out to shoot baskets. So I'm very hurt. But also, it's a little bit the theme of basketball as a mental health exercise, not as just a competitive game. And then saw my mother bring my, sort of almost by the ear, drag my father out into the garage and berate him for his treatment of me. And my mother never, ever disagreed with my father in public. So it was like very painful for me, because it's like, geez, Dad, what are you? And you know, it's a little bit, my father was not an alcoholic, but he drank a lot, okay? So it's a little bit that set of issues. And it was the pain for me, but it was also a rejoicing that my mother stood up for herself and stood up for her children in private when she had to. So it's like, yay, rah, Mom, which Dad wasn't quite so, you know. And I was totally shocked that I felt called to write that story, because it's not a story that I'm happy to even think about, mostly. And only Gail really sort of knew the story. I don't think I ever told my sons. So I never told it. So, you know, you're writing along, it's like, oh, you never told, you know, your next door neighbor or, you know, sort of a friend over, you know, a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and now you're going to write it in this book. That's weird. But I wrote it partly, I thought, you know what? Other people have had this experience, or you know, have had something like this, and so why not write it? Especially because it does have the positive of the experience of my mother, and just being able to rejoice in her courage in the garage, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So that was a surprise. I guess I was surprised about how religious I am. You know, because I mean, I certainly was very committed to being. I was agnostic, and in college, I think after my freshman year, I always put, instead of religious affiliation, I always put agnostic for 3 years, and then kind of the story of my conversion. Yeah. And again, sort of thinking back on our life story, I mean, I'm so grateful for Gail for standing, you know, with me and by me, and yeah, that, you know, she was totally nuts to marry me. It's like, it's like, you know, I'm a penniless seminarian. I'm in the draft resistance movement. I was going to borrow.
$50 to take the bus to our wedding to get from Chicago to New York, because he did not have a cent, and he was going to hitchhike. And I kept thinking, well, what if he could get there? Yes.
But everybody hitchhikes to their wedding. I mean, what else is, so no. So yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Do we get any little books or no?
No, I don't have any. I just have mine, but it's an ebook on Amazon, and it's a paperback on Amazon. I put the.
Bring some 1 week, and we can have them available for purchase.
Okay, I can do that. All right, we can bring some next week. Because huh? Well, you'll be here. I brought some extras, and. But I put the lowest price I could on it, because it's like, you know, I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not really interested in money on the thing. It's like, this is a base. It's your basic lose money proposition. I really just wanted to tell the story, and I did find an editor who helped me find this really beautiful photo on the front. And when I saw it, it's like, that's it, because I love turtles. When I was in Indonesia, I swam with the green sea turtles with my son, and to be able to swim, I was saying to somebody, you can scuba dive when you're swimming. You can swim right at the speed of a green sea turtle, and so to kind of just hang out and look the green sea turtle in the eye and say, "How you doing, man? What's it like today?" And have the sea turtle talk to you is really like totally mystical, marvelous. So I love the photo. So
well, you've got people in cyberspace, perhaps, who can't always hear what we're saying, can you tell them how to access that? Is that Amazon?
Yeah, just go on Amazon, and it's Memory and Spirit. I use Joseph Brooks Smith, so some people in my life know me as Joseph because I was Joseph until I was 22, and then I started using my middle name, so people know me as Brooks as well. So I thought, well, we'll just keep them confused by putting both names together. So that's my full name.
Online. I think the hardest thing for me when I think about spiritual autobiography is prompts. How to, where do you start? What do you write about? What stories do you tell? What stories do you not tell?
Well, and I think, we're so blessed because you're such a wonderful storyteller. And your stories about your journey and the way in which you, I think, nurture that in the congregation to say, listen, it's about our stories. It's about our stories more than our theology, which is like, it's taken me a little while to figure that one out, but not too long. Ridiculous.
I just wanted to say I read it last night. I downloaded it and read it last night, and this is just a positive review. I haven't written a positive review. It shouldn't be done on Amazon to get started. But I appreciate that you shared so much, and you were so honest in your sharing in your stories.
Well, thank you. And I think one thing is, I certainly try to be honest. I try to be humble in the sense that there's stories. On the one hand, I did establish the school rebound record, but our school was only 3 years old at the time. But still, I established it when I was feverish and sick because I was relaxed. Those of you who played sports, if you play and you're uptight, then it's tough. You've got to be in the flow of the game. And I was mostly on the uptight side when I became a varsity basketball player. But one time, I had a fever, and that I was relaxed, and I could just go out there and just let it rip, and that was my one super good game. But so I tell that story not so much about like, oh well, I wasn't a great basketball player. We had a mediocre team, but the experience of playing on a team and some of the positive and negative aspects of that were there. And I also was, there's certainly things, of course, I'm proud of, both as a pastor, as a father, as a husband, and some things, of course, I'm not as proud of. And one of the interesting things was I wrote a chapter about being very attracted to a woman that we got to, was part of our larger community, and so I made sure that Gail helped edit that chapter too, and I think that was like in premarital counseling. I always say to people, look, you're going to have attractions to people outside of your marriage. Happens. You can either pretend it never happens, and that's dangerous, or you can say it happens, and you need to have a plan, a commitment as to how you're going to deal with it. So, at any rate, it was. I'm very happy to have written it, and it's like whether many people read it or not is secondary. I hope if anybody finds it helpful and blessed and passes it on, that's wonderful. But I do hope that we do a retreat. Yes?
Also a legacy for your family, for people in other generations. We don't always know a lot about like our grandparents and their lives before we were born. So I think writing can be a gift for people, and just people in the community that tell the stories of Mississippi Samba. And those stories told by those people helps us to more understand those times.
Absolutely. Again, my experience in Mississippi, our generation, we had a 50th reunion of Mississippi Freedom Summer, and will we have a 60th? Maybe, but everybody will be in their 90s. So that cohort of people is getting smaller who were there. And so, yeah, I love telling stories about that struggle so people understand, in part, the depth. We think apartheid as South Africa, but it was the southern part of America, too, with just a few different flavors, but it was the same ice cream. So, and the legacy thing is also important. I certainly did write it for our grandchildren, and mortality. you know, people are dying. More people than usual, and people younger than us are dying, you know, at all different ages than us, we're various ages, but I mean, are dying, and so you think a little bit, I guess COVID has done that to me a bit. I don't know if it's done it to you, but it's like, geez, I could get COVID, a breakthrough infection, and there's this super healthy 37-year-old that died of COVID, so I better get with it, you know? So all right, well, sometime here we'll do a day retreat or something on spiritual journeys. We'll ask people, we'll give some prompts about questions and ask people to bring some of their own stories, write some stuff down, share stories. We'll read read pieces from great spiritual autobiographies. You know, C.S. Lewis, Thomas Merton, Annie Lamott. We'll have fun, okay?